Living Spirit of God, we thank you for this holy night. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be life and hope and peace to us. Amen. Please be seated. When something magnificent or extraordinary happens in the midst of our everyday lives, whether a flash of insight, a story of heroism, a tragedy, or just something beautiful that we encounter, we feel compelled to tell others about such experiences. And we tell our stories for maybe days and weeks to come. And if it's really amazing, for months to come or for the coming year. It's stunning this evening that we gather together around a story that took place roughly 2013 years ago. Though the tradition retells and reappropriates this narrative in all its ineffable meaning, the fact is that something absolutely extraordinary happened in real time and space in a real town in the Middle East called Bethlehem. A child was born in poverty from a teenage girl named Mary. And this took place in the context of an empire where Rome was in charge. The child's name was Jesus. And this humble birth made rulers and kings of his day tremble in fear. And it actually altered the course of human history. And here we are this night as the bearers of this story, still inspired, still moved, still carrying forward this movement of divine love coming among us and continuing to alter life as we know it today. On that note, Merry Christmas to all of you. Thank you. We got one Merry Christmas there. Merry Christmas to all of you. Good evening to all of you, family and friends, especially to those who are visiting tonight. We're so glad that you're here. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Jerusalem for a Christian pilgrimage and also to engage and learn more about the political realities of the Middle East and all their complexity. We visited many of the holy sites of Jesus' life, and one of the sites was the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, which is the church built over the cave that tradition marks as the birthplace of Jesus. Early theologians in the church believed that it is likely Jesus was actually born in a cave hewn out of the ground, which is a different image than the well-carved, sanitized wooden barn structure with animals lined up in perfect symmetry out in the back of a first-century Days Inn. First-century theologian Justin Martyr wrote in his dialogue with Trypho that Joseph took up his quarters in a certain cave near the village. And while they were there, Mary brought forth the Christ and placed him in a manger. And here the Magi who came from Arabia found him there. Though I do like the image of the stable, I am nonetheless provoked by the idea of Jesus being born in a cave, in all of its metaphorical dynamism. When we consider the caves of our lives and our world, the caves of injustice, of exclusion, of violence, of hunger, poverty, sickness, or broken relationships, this image makes a lot of sense. Because we know that this season, though beautiful and joyous, and all of the festive gatherings, for many resurrects all kinds of pain and turmoil that we would rather not experience again. If you are heavy-hearted tonight for any reason, know this gospel word that it is into dry and dark places that the light of God has come to shine. Now back to the pilgrimage I mentioned a moment ago. In each of the sites we visited, we were encouraged by our leaders to really pause and reverence and make an authentic connection with each of these sacred places. And in the Church of the Nativity, I was waiting in a long line of pilgrims where at its end was a bronze color star branded into the earth, where we could kneel to say a prayer or to kiss the star where Jesus was born. And if you will imagine for a moment, this church is a large worship space, a little bit like this, except there's multiple different altars and centers of worship in different parts of the building. And while we waited in line, on the other side of the church, there was a different line of people gathered for a different purpose. And out of the blue, we were startled by a vigorous commotion as we saw people quickly walking down a center aisle amidst a crowd that was carrying a coffin. A mother cried out in wailing tears, so jarring and shocking and raw, "Habibi, Habibi," which means my love in Arabic. It became clear right away that we were witnessing the funeral for a son or a daughter. Haunted by her shrill cries, those of us pilgrims waiting for our moment of peace with the Christ child were jarred out of any shred of religious pretense. And there was a question palpably present in that space, whether we had the courage to voice it or not. What does this line here that we are standing in have to do with this line over here? What does this religious procession or pilgrimage towards the birthplace of Jesus have to do with the most sorrowful of real life, and arguably the hell that is unfolding over there? Myself and everyone in the pilgrimage line stood in this tension. And with echoes of this mother's cry still ringing in my ears, I continued forward, walked down a few steps into the cave of the divine birth. I knelt down with my hands and my face to the earth, and I kissed the star. There are many in our culture, and perhaps some of us here tonight, who carry a similar question in our own consciousness. What does faith or religion, or what does this birth have to do with our real life and all of its struggles and complexity? With all of the negative connotations to the notion of religion in our culture, it's interesting that the root of the word religion is the same as the word ligament. As one author says, religion means to connect, to bring everything together in one body or one wholeness. And means again. So we can say that good religion is about binding us together again into one body with God, acknowledging that different religious families have different ways of describing and relating to God. It's also about bonding and uniting us with all of creation, the trees and the mountains and the animals, with the stars and space and wind. In this light, true religion and spirituality are two names for the same thing: the pursuit of vital connection, which turns out is another name for love. Most of us then are not anti-religion, but just anti-bad religion. It's also fascinating in our day and age where church attendance is dwindling that there still continues to be large crowds that stream in and gather for worship on Christmas Eve. Even the most cynical and unreligious among us, unreligious. Why is this? Perhaps in our mind's eye, it's simply a lovely tradition, something we've always done. The music is beautiful, the family is together, and I affirm all of these realities. Yet I wonder if there is a deeper reality somewhere in the recesses of our consciousness. I wonder if there are echoes in the cave that transcend generations. And we have this sense that this story, though totally absurd, could actually be true and could be the game changer for you and I and for the life of the world. One of the beauties of worshiping in a liturgical church is that we can focus on a moment in the liturgical cycle, such as the birth of Jesus, and prayerfully tune into something important to contemplate or consider. Though the resurrected, prophetic, adult Jesus is also present and celebrated today in the bread and wine made holy, yet we are beckoned tonight to consider that God chose to be enfleshed, not in a mighty conqueror of status and power, but as a totally dependent and vulnerable baby. It makes no sense, yet it makes perfect sense. In Jesus, God was totally dependent on the care of Mary and Joseph for his survival. We talk a lot about believing in God, but maybe more importantly, God believes in us. And in the Christ child, we are offered the most raw and unpretentious embodiment of receiving love. For some of us, we give a lot of ourselves. We are exhausted and at the end of ourselves. And if this is you, be reminded today that at the ground of everything is a continual offering of love which renews and strengthens us for the work of justice and goodness in the world we are called to, in the work that we are called to do. This gives a whole new meaning to one of the ways that God has been described as the ground of all being. Hence, suffering and trial and pain need not be our enemies to constantly fight against, but through the power of the gospel, suffering of any kind can be used by the divine energy to push us gently down to the ground where it is safe to stand and where a new kind of power dwells. One author, Ken Wilber, writes that in moments such as these, you and I remember, perhaps vaguely, perhaps intensely, that we were once consciously one with the very divine itself. It is in this memory trace, in the back of our awareness, pulling and pushing us to realize, to awaken, to remember who and what we always already are. In the incarnation, or the birth of Jesus, God reveals that love was never gone. We were never separated from this source. No matter who you are, race, culture, sexual orientation, age, gender, any classification that you can think of, everyone is held in this love. And the issue is not our separation from God, but our awareness of what has always been there, or our avoidance of that which is more tender and fierce and beautiful than we are comfortable with. So my invitation tonight with the shepherds, with the animals, is to come. Come and simply be present to love. And it's really not as easy as it sounds. Love is gentle, but it's not genteel. It both comforts and challenges us. Be present to this love in your life in any form that it may come. Come into this sacred cave under a starry sky in the cool of night in wordless wonder, and kneel down and kiss the star, which is love given to us. Amen.